Hello, everybody.
Hi,
It,
we're
it,
here.
yes, we are. Now Drawcast. This is gonna be our I don't know what episode this is of learning from quote unquote masters. Those quotes are not meant to be disrespectful, and I fear they may have come off that way. Just everybody likes different things, and today we're looking at something topical, trying to do all that good stuff. And what is more topical?
Then Invincible. Sorry.
No. You're right. I was just gonna say there's probably a lot of things that are more topical, but a lot of art nerds and comic nerds, cartoon nerds are liking this, and for good reason. I'm up to date with the show. I watched season 1, season 2, the Adam Eve special. You watched season 1, I think.
Yeah, and I have not caught up since
And
then.
but I'm sure you've seen some clips and everything. And again, I like many people am watching the show mainly. I know that there's a comic book out there, obviously, and I'm sure that the comic book is great. But I don't really know a good way to, see all that up to date. I don't know where to go. I could buy the comic book. I'm sure there's ways to read online.
True.
So yeah, we're gonna look at the art of the comic because as far as the animation goes, I'll get this out of the way really quick. It's good animation. It is economical animation first and foremost. They use their budget well. There is brilliant keyframing, great use of tweens, I think. There's ways it could be improved. If you want a specific deep dive into the kind of current status of TV animation, I'm down to do that. But I think that the American, and we have a comics expert here, but I would call this a very American comic style, which is pretty representative of the time, I think. So
it's very industry. I would say industry standard with, at least within like the later comics, a lot more realistic kind of style in comparison to when it first started back in I think 2003 with a much more simplistic style.
Yeah. Which I'm looking at some of these now, and I while you were up taking a pee, which spoiler alert, girls do go pee. I love, which again, this is almost emblematic of, like I said, how the show animation is very economical. Those are dot eyes. And it's so great because even in the same panel, the dad has a full ass eye there, like, and right above it is this gruesome eye. But like, as a comic page, you'd be zoomed out this much probably, or you'd be able to read the words, so it'd probably be like this, and it works. And again, it's a pleasing style. It's very classic, comics. Yeah.
Very indie, very simplistic.
Yeah,
and that's all Cory Walker's work in comparison. We're doing a kind of comparison to Cory Walker and the other artist, Ryan Ottley. Those are the two artists that worked on this series. So most of the...
If I can ask a real quick question, I guess. So, and what's the name of the guy that made Invincible?
The one who wrote it?
Yeah.
Shoot, what was his name? Robert Kirkman.
Robert Kirkman. Because he also did The Walking Dead, which I think would be, if people like this, it'd be another fun one to look at. So he's just the writer?
He is just the writer.
Okay, because it's, like I said, if you look at the show and everything, it's stated as created by Robert Kirkman. Do you, and this is all speculation, but you understand the industry a little bit at least, so...
Yes.
What do you think his influence on the art is, if anything? Because I would say the Invincible comic does feel, aside from like the difference between a superhero and a horror, there's a lot of visual similarities, I feel like, but it seems like it's different artists. So what do you think the
pipeline? We kind of had...
do you think the writer influences the art at all, or is it really kind of segmented of one guy's off in one room writing, the other guy gets the script, and they kind of just rock and roll that way? Because I know... animation and film, some things are very segmented, but it would make sense if everybody was kind of on the same page with the same vision, you would think.
From what I can recall, and I could be wrong, Cory Walker had more influence on the character design than Robert Kirkman, because Kirkman is basically the writer, and then the artist would have more of the character designs. Something that you pointed out off screen in our talks and research is that you kind of pointed out, if you don't know whether comics are like animation, if there's like one director and everyone's just like following them and everything. Whoops.
Unprofessional.
So from what I've seen, comics and the animation pipeline are very similar in a way, in that there is a writer, there's usually a penciler, an inker, and then a colorist. But for this purpose, both the artists, as in Cory Walker and Ryan Ottley, they penciled and inked all of the panels, and then they send them off to the colorist after they receive all of the scripts from Kirkman.
Okay, but Kirkman's very not, theoretically at least, not in there, which is interesting because I guess is that a very. Well, I have this one more question, and then we'll get into your beautiful research, which is great. This thought came into my head, and I think it's worth asking is because the assumption or belief or vibe of a lot of comics is that it's a way to very purely put your idea out there. It's very controlled by a singular person, especially if you look at like manga. Like I'm sure, manga studios do have multiple teams, but like, you think of, Kubo or I can't remember all their names, but the guy who made Naruto, like I'm sure they have assistants, they have a team, but like the writer is often the artist. Junji Ito is pretty much just doing all of his stuff solo. And that's very common over there. Is that not? It sounds like that's, aside from like, your indie web comics, as soon as you get professional published, you often get more of a very animation TV style studio pipeline thing
It's
going.
a very case-by-case basis.
Okay.
So,
because Marvel is often the same thing, and they have like written by him, penned by this
penciled
guy,
by this guy, inked by this guy, colored by this guy.
But you don't even see that in a Japanese manga too much, or again, at least it's not as noticeable.
I don't think it's as noticeable, but there were like some anime that you kind of could see that where there's a team of inkers.
Yeah, but it's even then it seems like the main artist still controls a lot of that. I mean, you think that's just like the idea of Japanese art studios just, again, being more controlling, having that sole voice being more of a thing?
In a sense, yes. The other part of the control goes to the editor to make sure like all of these changes are being made and all of that stuff.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. Well, from here, I got the our own pipeline. I got the tablet. Walk us through how you want this to go. What are we looking at?
Let's start with the first issue cover up at the top here.
Okay. Which again, very classic, simplified, cell shaded. Oh, excuse me. Oh, shiz. Sorry about that. Yeah. Very simplified, stylized, but like clear.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that is clearly Cory Walker's work.
You said almost like a diss. That's clearly a Walker.
Because we're gonna get into like more pages and whatnot, but again, it's almost like he drew this in a way where it's very like drawn for animation. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like there's differences between the comic and the show style, but especially here, it does look just like that. Like I know a lot of comics, like some of the panels here, they'll be very cross-hatching. They'll have some more detailed rendering, but like, yeah, I can animate that character, no problem.
Yeah. In comparison to much more of the realistic style over here, because I believe that's more of Ryan Ottley's work.
Okay.
Which.
And it's beautiful, and you can see a lot of, in my mind at least, you can see a lot of similarities between, like, the more detailed renderings and the more quote-unquote flat stuff, because, like, the shape language is mostly the same. A lot of the character design is still very true to itself. Like, it's like it's the same style, just more time was spent, or at least that's how I see it, which is very fun to be that clear from the get-go.
From the get-go, yeah. Let's do a deep dive into the actual.
You want me to go into your top half?
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is basically the first part of Cory Walker's run. It's a lot more. You can see some of the anatomy was kind of rough, especially in the first page compared to one of the later pages in
Where would you give me which one do you want us to zoom in on? I forget.
Let's zoom in on the top panel from page 6 of issue 1.
This one here.
Yeah.
Okay, I thought you were gonna want me to redline the turlet.
No, we're not gonna redline the the turlet.
So, I mean, as far as the head shape goes, like it's very traditionally head, I'd say. We don't have a lot of problems there. The eyes are maybe a little far apart, but the neck is the first thing I would notice. It's very, I guess rough. And then we got our classic box here. And then, classic comic book lady chest. So if we turn this back off, so that's you. This is where you're saying it's a little rough anatomy.
Yeah, just a little bit. It feels more like, oh gosh, when you first start drawing anatomy and everything just feels very boxy.
Okay, yeah. Which I don't know. So do you think that's a charm, or do you? Because Cory Walker isn't new at this stage, obviously.
No, but this
is. So what do you think that this is fully an issue? Is there charm to it? What's your?
I want to say it's a bit of a charm to it, and kind of forgivable because it is the first page or two, or rather the first
issue,
the very first issue back in 2003, and a lot of time went on, and from much more of his recent work, I would give that as a starting point.
Okay. Would you say, even if you're a recognized artist in the industry, whenever you start a new run, it's always going to be, I guess, rough going into it, just because it's a new pitch you have to get going.
It's a new pitch.
Even if you are this big recognizable name, it's still like, we don't know this show though, so it's not Batman.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other big takeaways? Because I would say it's still, from the things that I had in our first year overview panel, like the anatomy can be a little rough, but it's still very clear.
Yeah.
It's still very well framed, I would say. There's not, over here we have a lot of negative space, but it's normal, and a big part of Invincible is that classic dichotomy between family relationships, normal life, the mask that you have on, and then the crazy, insane superhero stuff. So I feel like, Mark, we have the entire, we don't have dead space at the top or at the bottom, and it's a very, normal kid thing of just like, mom, back off. And again, here we have our house, we have mom and door. Like, the frame is filled with your information that you're looking for. It's not wasted space. So I would say, which to me feels like still strong work.
Yes. And also, there's not much of like actual stylization until you get about 6 more issues in.
Okay. You want to take a look at the other page here?
Yeah, so this is from issue 7. So with this issue, I had to really work hard to find the ones where Cory Walker actually worked on, because there were multiple artists with different segments. Because this is the one where we see the Heroes of the Globe?
Yeah.
The name of the
Guardians of the Globe.
Guardians of the Globe.
Yeah.
Because each of the different members were from each of the different artists, so I had to find one that was strictly Cory Walker before Nolan wrecks house. And I think you could see here there's some, I guess, improvement on the anatomy, and you kind of see more of that stylization come to light.
I feel like it might even be, I would argue it's less of that there's improvement on the anatomy and more of, again, going back to the show, choosing where you put your budget. here it feels very similar. You're not going to put a lot of budget into effectively a gag about a mom bugging in her son while he's on the toilet.
No, yeah.
And so there's not a lot of heavy inking work going on here. It's not, it's a decent framing, but it's not crazy dramatic. Whereas here we now have, all of the musculature going on. Whoever inked it, had a lot to worry about. Like, I wouldn't say it's better or worse anatomy. Even
I think that was still Corey that inked it, so he penciled it and inked it.
But we got like the actual little rump there. We got your superhero bulge, all those geometric shapes for the thighs and everything. You have that classic rib cage going on. A very broad man, just a handsome broad gentleman. Mm-hmm. That nice angular jaw and everything going on. So, good silhouette. Like, it's just that there was clearly more work done here than over here, I think. Because this is an actual superhero thing going on.
Yeah, an action set piece.
Even, like, the difference between this close-up, and, like, these two close-ups. You actually have, like, your eye wrinkles, that crazy exaggerated nose, like, the fun eyebrows going. You could draw him the same way you drew her, but there's actual emotion and storytelling going on. Or not to discredit over here, mm-hmm. but this is what the comic is pitched on. It's a superhero show, so this is where they worried about it. These fingers could have just been, your classic blocked fist, but no, they went ahead and they did, individually. Fingers with depth and your finger wrinkles and everything, and I think that's just different. They even have like difference in pen weight going here mm-hmm. for things, which again I think just shows the difference in like, oh, we want this to be dramatic. This doesn't have to be dramatic or dynamic. Would you agree, or am I missing things or looking too much? Or
no, I would say I would agree, and it kind of brings me to question. What the actual process is like which page they would work on first. You know what I mean?
Yeah. If it's anything like animation, or at least when we talked about in my classes, you didn't want to do the hardest or the most intense shot first normally. You didn't want to, it was very much picking your level of importance. We would say it's your A shot, your B shot, your C shots. Your A shots, there's no matter what budget cuts go down, no matter what compromises you make, these are necessary for the story or for the theme. You cannot take these out. Mm-hmm. Your B shots are the ones you really, really want. Not quite necessary, yeah. But you want to do them though. Your C shots are the ones where you're like, okay, these ones we can drop if we need to. We like them. And you shouldn't have any D shots. Is kind of the rule.
Correct.
So you probably started working mainly in your A shots. If you had to get a bunch of scenes done, or you were in crunch time, or you didn't have a lot of time that week, that's a time to work on some of your C shots that aren't as necessary, but they're easy to crank out.
Yeah. So with that line of thinking, it makes me wonder if that similar process was used in comics.
I would imagine. I mean, yeah. I would imagine it's a bit more of like a page by page thing. Animation, I can literally go in and be like, "Oh, I'm gonna do this specific shot." Whereas comics, you're probably a bit more dedicated to getting a whole page to a certain point. Is there anything else that you wanted to look at on this one, or you want me to go to the bottom half?
No, let's just go to the bottom half. So this is where we start looking at Otley's artwork. So if we go over to issue 8.
So is this much further in the timeline of the show, or not like the chronological timeline, but the production of the show, or is this just literally almost the same time as the other ones? And okay, I can probably look at
the show was
issue 126, issue 127.
No, we're looking at
issue 7. So this is in the future.
Yeah. So issue 8 is where we see Otley's artwork, and as you can see, this is where I guess his work is kind of similar to Walker's artwork, or he's trying to like emulate that same thing until he starts coming into his own.
Which I still see a lot of. It feels very similar to me.
I think that was the point,
Yeah,
especially with.
It to me the biggest difference I'm seeing is still in coloring, and not even just like coloring, like a bit more of a clear atmospheric tone going on here, and more detail in the shading, which just is a
That
fun way to
could
show
be
budget
more-
to me.
That could be more of they got a different colorist as well, or if they use the same colorist.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I think that's the point that you just mentioned, that this line work is very similar to Walker's artwork.
Yeah. Which was always strong, geometric. Again, if we're looking at the very first one, there's a bit more, you have like your spot blacks going on to increase, your silhouettes and everything.
Yep.
But, it's still like mostly there's not a round edge to be seen in Invincible.
Correct.
Which is again a very American comics thing, I feel like nowadays.
Yes.
Is that just because it's you can do a hard line, it's faster to do bip bip than to try to be like ooh, eh. Do you think that's the main thing, or is there another reason why comics just seem to have this thing with a hard edge?
Again, I think that's just more personal taste on the artist, because compared to Otley's first issue as an artist to issue 126, you could see that drastic change from geometric to a much more realistic style. And with American comics, a lot of people tend to try and go more for the realistic style, especially in standard.
I don't know, like I do see what you're saying. Like there's, especially like in the musculature they start to do it, but this is still easily broken down into your classic, superhero thing. It's like it looks like they just did this, but then when they lined it, they curved it a little bit more. Yeah. I'm still seeing very much, that sharp chin, especially here. You got that sharp angle, straight lines for that.
Yeah.
So I think
more of it. Sorry,
I just think that like I don't know. It still has that vibe to me, even though it is objectively rounder. Yeah. Especially like, and of course, the women will always have, that more appealing curves, even if it's in the hair versus, Mark with his, I don't know, bad boy, spiky protagonist hair.
Yeah.
But
I think it also has to, sorry, am I interrupting? I think it also has to do with the inking process. Especially as time went on, you see a lot more hatching, especially hatching and cross hatching in this to make that more realistic, I guess, texture.
Yeah.
Feel.
Yeah, I get you. And I mean, even again, like the rendering, you have that nice anime sheen going with his hair there. I don't know. Maybe it is. I think it's just, especially when it comes to superhero stuff. Like I do see what you're saying, more realistic. Where it's less budget, you're getting that cross hatching time. Again, more shading. There is more roundness here, but like it still to me carries that sharp, straight line, angular design that's just American superhero shows, I think. And if you're saying it's mainly just personal preference, I mean, there's no denying that this stuff is inspired by Marvel, DC superhero shit. So, maybe it's just a lot of us nerds like that.
Yeah. So from issue 8 all the way to issue 126, a lot of people were very used to Otley's artwork and the way that he draws things, so that when the next issue came out, Cory Walker is back, and the style shift was kind of jarring to a lot of people.
Really?
Yeah.
See, again, like I noticed the lack of we have our edge light here and our edge light's missing here, but it still to me feels very. It feels like the same universe to me still.
It is the same universe, but if you kind of compare the way to how Otley drew Mark and Eve compared to how Walker drew Mark and Eve, you kind of see more of the
for one of the first things I see is like we have an actual chin here, whereas this one again is that kind of almost anime boy. Yeah, I do see what you're saying. Which style do you think you like more? Do you like this realistic, everything's glossy thing going on, or do you like the, I guess for lack of a better term, flatness going on over here?
I kind of like the flatness of this.
Yeah, 'cause, again, especially Invincible is a critique or a dive on comics itself, so it's nice to have again this very classical thing going on, which again is like clear, it's stylized, it's very solid.
A little bit more geometric too.
Yeah.
Especially like in the background here, you can see much more simpler shapes than just the finer detail over.
Yeah, I mean like, yeah, if we're looking at literally over here, it's just a bunch of lines that someone, did that too, basically.
Yeah.
Which is fun because again, simplicity will often mean clarity. With this, if I draw this shape, and then especially as soon as anything goes over it, and this is an alien planet and everything, I'm sure, so it's supposed to be a little foreign, but if I turn things off, that doesn't look like anything.
No.
And this doesn't either, but it's just the lights in the background, so you're not distracted by it, which is not very distracting anyway. You have, because again, your characters, going back to like the core foundations of the style, I feel like the characters are always in the foreground. It's not a show that is worrying too much about. It's not like Samurai Jack, where you're gonna have long sweeping shots of your sci-fi world too often. So
a lot of people, when they were really closely following the whole timeline of events and going issue by issue, a lot of people, especially because I had to look on Reddit as a starting point.
Okay.
A lot of people were really jarred going from issue 126 to issue 127. Going from Otley's work to Walker's work, and a lot of people, they did not like that kind of big change, and for lack of a better term, Walker's art got shit on a lot more.
Really? That's so weird because it's not what I would think. Really?
Yeah, because over time they've gotten so used to Otley's artwork that it became more of an industry standard for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that when the change happened during, like, towards the middle or middle of the end of the reboot arc, when Walker came back for, like, the next 6 issues, it wasn't a really welcomed change.
Interesting.
This is all objectively speaking.
Yeah.
So.
No, I get you. It's interesting. I think it's one of those things where, yeah, if you're following it week by week, month by month, and you're especially if you're not aware, you're just like, wait, what happened? Like, I get it, but like looking back at it in retrospect here, like, yeah, I get what you're saying. I can't disagree, but I'm looking at it and I'm like, it's very similar. It just looks like the first thing I notice is, again, just they put more time into shading and rendering there, which for me is never that big of a takeaway if the foundation is so strong, which again, I think Cory Walker has a strong enough foundation that, you can get away with less lights and bells and whistles, like,
Yeah.
Like, I like just 2 characters holding each other on a gradient because that's the emotion that needs to be conveyed. So I'm down. Like,
yeah. And outside of Invincible, because I looked at a bunch of Cory Walker's art outside of Invincible, I personally like that. I like the simplicity of it, the simple shapes and all of that.
Yeah.
Which could make me in the minority compared to others, but hey,
well,
I like what I like.
And we are looking at it as a foundation of artistic visual technicalities, not of quality of the story, not what is conveying the specifics of each scene necessarily. Because, I mean, like, comics, we have this little snapshot. I mean, the words get a little pixelated because, downloading JPEGs and everything. But, you can see this sequence of, characters reuniting, discussing, trying to explain something, not liking what's being heard. Oh shit, I may have screwed up. And then, reconciliation or coming to terms with whatever it is. Like, you can get that little snapshot there, but
Yeah.
there's obviously a much bigger story that's being told that you're not in the loop on. But again, I would say you're getting the same thing here. You have what looks like an emotional reunion or news being shared, similar feeling, or, literally that little bit, you're here, I know, I'm sorry. Again, clearly a reuniting, an embrace, and, bringing a family or friends in close together. The camera's literally zooming in there. Like, that's clear storytelling, and that's all you need. But if you're following something for months, years, some of these stories go on for a lifetime, and when you get that into it, you do just kind of you get into it.
Yeah.
Like, look at every, I'm not trying to take shots or anything, but like the My Little Pony fandom or anything like that, like, people care.
Yeah.
And that's all. I'm not trying to say it's bad or anything. It's just people care. And when you care that much, and someone comes in, makes a change or says something, but doesn't know what the relevance of that something is to you, it's gonna sit away. So is that kind of our? Because again, this obviously was not a tutorial how to draw like Cory Walker or
Ryan
Otley.
Otley.
This was a deep dive on what to take away from Masters of the Craft. So would you say after all this, our takeaway is, if you're when working on a series, just because things will change, you'll get better, you'll get worse, you'll shift your style to fit the story you're telling,
and you can't really please everyone.
Yeah. But if you're gonna change, because the art style you draw says something about the world, the tone, the vibe. So if you're gonna switch, just kind of be prepared for it or be aware of it. Think of, again, the difference between it. Again, there's geometric and more stylistic differences, but the difference between glossy and flat can have an impact on a long running issue. So maybe it's just consistency is worthwhile. It's because people are gonna, if people liked what they saw last week, they want different, they want exciting, but they want the same. Cool. Is that I'm on the right page there? Or do you have something more?
I believe that's the
profound
the
to say with your research and all that, or
no? I just like looking and comparing different artists to the same franchise.
Yeah, it was
and
fun.
This is a pretty good takeaway from it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we're gonna go ahead and record a tutorial next, or maybe the tutorial's already out. I don't know what order we're doing things, but we're trying to get in the habit of bulk recording so that when we go off on vacations, tournaments, or markets, we're not floundering for a couple weeks. We will continue doing studying the Masters projects. We'll keep doing tutorials. We have some hit camp stuff coming out. We're gonna try to make some little shorts more, which I know we keep saying, but we're working on. We're also working on a Helldiver fan art, which has been a lot of fun. So subscribe up, see some stuff. Any farewell words you want to throw out there?
Until then, stay weird.
You
Bye.
fucking nerds.
Hey.